We believe that offering this conceptualization contributes towards the overall goal of improving our understanding of intuition more generally. In the first case, we examined the nature of personal knowledge to identify different knowledge types. We started from distinction of knowing that and knowing how, to which we added 3 further types. We concluded that both the know why and the know what belong to intuition. In the second case, we surveyed the literature and identified a set of 6 features which define intuitive knowledge. These 6 features of intuition resemble closely those of others. 3 of these apply to the process of intuiting, and 3 to the outcome of such a process, the intuitive knowledge. Intuiting is rapid, often labeled instantaneous. Spontaneous, does not require effort, and cannot be deliberately controlled. And illogical, meaning that it does not necessarily contradict the rules of logic, but does not follow them either. The outcome of the intuitive process is tacit in that the intuitives cannot give account of how they arrived at the results. Holistic, also often called Gestalt, as it is concerned with the totality of a situation rather than parts of it. And the intuitor feels confident about their intuition, with no apparent reason in terms of evidence. Alongside this process of searching for the features of intuition, we have recognized that all the reports, whether academic or practitioner, from a variety of fields, including management, psychology, and philosophy, as well as reports from artists and scientists from diverse fields, mention 2 major areas in which intuition is used, namely decision-taking and creative problem-solving. Based on the above, we challenge one of the underlying assumptions of the vast majority of intuition research in the field of management, namely that all intuition is judgment. As many of the management scholars interested in intuition are coming from the discipline of decision-making, this assumption appears to be taken for granted, so much so that it is usually not explicitly stated. However, we believe that this implicit presumption limits our understanding of intuition, which is particularly salient in the case of creative intuition. As we will show, distinguishing between intuitive judgment and intuitive insight does not contradict any of the findings arrived at when considering intuition as judgment. Rather, it adds an extra dimension to the previously suggested typologies, and thus offers a richer picture of intuition. It also does not directly contradict the distinction between intuition and insight. Instead, it refines the distinction, namely there is intuitive and non-intuitive insight, just as there is intuitive and non-intuitive judgment. We are not introducing a superfluous concept in an area which is already riddled with models and constructs. Instead, we believe that based on previous research, the distinct tie-on between intuitive judgment and intuitive insight can help us achieve a more nuanced and comprehensive picture of intuition. Although we agree with that intellect cannot completely understand the intuition, since the artificial tools, preconceived categories, and symbols used by the intellect only represent reality and are not the substance of reality, we believe that it is important to try from an intuitive understanding of intuition to extract and logically develop concepts. We establish intuition as a form of knowledge, emphasizing that in this research we are only interested in intuition as it operates at high levels of expertise, providing scope and focus. Then we attempt to describe the process of intuiting. For this, we need to first briefly revisit the concepts of focal and subsidiary awareness. Finally, we introduce our idea of distinguishing between intuitive judgment and intuitive insight, offering it as an additional viewpoint in the ongoing development of the conceptual framework for intuition research. We illustrate how they can be integrated into the existing typologies as a new dimension. Inspiration comes only to the prepared mind. In terms of knowing, We can use our knowledge to understand something through analytical step-by-step reasoning, comparing and contrasting alternatives, evaluating them, examining their characteristics, the associated costs and benefits. Such step-by-step reasoning is not the only way of knowing. Intuitive knowledge is often described by scientists and decision-takers too. They just know, in a moment without knowing how or why they'd know. The knowledge arrived at by means of intuiting we call intuitive knowledge, based on an examination of a wide range of literature, for example social and cognitive psychology, history and philosophy of science, education, validity of intuitive knowledge. Conceptualizing intuition as intuitive knowledge, limiting the scope of the intuition field, enables us to apply the domain of knowledge to the domain of intuition. Intuition worthy of trust appears to be experienced by experts, and thus we limit our research to expert intuition. In spite of the large number of reports and studies in favor of intuition, it was not fully explored systematically in the mainstream academic literature until recently. The reason is probably that we prefer explicit knowledge obtained through well-defined, if possible standardized, procedures, and conversely we mistrust intuitive knowledge obtained through ad hoc. However, this perception has changed and more researchers are now recognizing that the deliberative conscious reasoning is not the only way of arriving at valid knowledge. This does not mean that scientists have not used their intuition before. Only typically they pretended that new knowledge has always been arrived at by the established scientific method of the time. Nevertheless, for decades there have been philosophers and scientists turned philosophers, fighting to establish intuition as a valid form of knowledge. After building up reputation in the accepted mainstream psychology, argue for the important role of intuition, particularly in considering the most significant scientific achievements. Reaching for knowledge with the right hand is science. Yet to say only that much of science is to overlook one of its excitements, for the great hypotheses of science are gifts carried in the left hand. Emphasize that it is usually the most esteemed scientists who earn the label intuitive, which in itself is strong evidence that scientists find intuition valuable. Opinion or imagination, reason, intuitive knowledge, and without much explanation. Intuitive knowledge is the most powerful of the three: thinking, feeling, sensation, and intuition. Intuition is a superior form of knowledge. No complex thought can be arrived at other than by means of intuiting. The role of intuition of helping to arrive at new ideas, after which we should abandon intuition, and work on building the body of knowledge using the new intuitively obtained knowledge. Once we start feeling lost, we should get in touch with our intuition again, often undoing what we have done in the deliberative phase, and so forth in cycles. Intuition as a method, particularly in metaphysics, and in areas of complex, dynamic, and abstract thinking, contrasting intuition to intellect. It must be noted that identifying intuition with intuitive knowledge is a limitation. We do not intend neglecting intuition outside the area of knowledge. However, this constraint helps provide a focus. Moreover, it must be acknowledged that intuition also appears in feelings and emotions, the physical, the emotional, the mental, and the spiritual. Extending the examination of intuition to the other three faculties can foster a deeper understanding as well as explain the somatic charges often reported about intuition. We have focused on this multipotential aspect of intuition and more generally of cognition. Intuition at high levels of expertise. When reviewing the literature on intuition, we initially believed that there is an additional feature, namely that intuition only appears where high levels of expertise exist. Some authors consider expert intuition as a particular type of intuition. We briefly analyze these two considerations in order to illustrate why we view expertise as something that characterizes valuable intuition rather than being a type of intuition in its own right, and based on this examination limit our focus to intuition of experts. Distinguish between expert intuition and entrepreneurial intuition. The former is past pattern-oriented, thus the experts, almost spontaneously, apply their existing knowledge in a familiar or similar to familiar situation. On the contrary, the latter is supposedly future and change-oriented, thus the ability to make novel connections and discern. The problem with this distinction is that the proposed two kinds of intuition reside in different dimensions. We can have different levels of expertise, and we can be entrepreneurial to varying degrees. Possible relationship is that one needs certain minimal level of expertise to be entrepreneurial in any field, and that higher level of knowledge means better entrepreneurship. Distinguish between holistic hunch and automated expertise. The first corresponds to judgment or choice made through a subconscious synthesis drawn from diverse experiences, whilst the second is merely a subconscious application of learned rules. Of course, for the holistic hunch to be able to synthesize information from diverse experiences, that information needs to be there. This simple distinction cannot be maintained. It is also a well-known phenomenon that experts will not only be able to handle situations they have already experienced or for what they have learned rules, but will also be able to go beyond the existing knowledge. Whilst many researchers consider intuition useful, other scholars argue fiercely against it. That is, those who have provided experimental evidence on the failure of intuition, we will see that many of them have examined novices' intuitions. Undergraduate students of business administration make poor intuitive judgments in the field of physics. Those who have found intuition useful in their respective fields of research in leadership typically focused on expert intuition. As empirical and particularly the experimental evidence in the area of intuition in management is relatively scarce, the previous argument is not conclusive, but the findings appear to illustrate that expertise contributes to effective intuition. What certainly appears to be the case is that intuition, at least good intuition, appears where there is high level of expertise. This, however, does not help in distinguishing intuition from non-intuition. Even though one can learn certain analytical steps and apply them at a low level of expertise, higher level of expertise certainly entails both better intuition and better analysis.